Can we agree that leadership isn't based on title or position? I have created this podcast to talk to everyday people who lead in extraordinary ways in their everyday lives, both professionally and personally, in the hope that it will inspire everyday people like you and me to realize we are everyday leaders. Welcome to Everyday Leadership. My guest today is the Global Director of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Peakon. She is an international multi-award winner for her services to diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. She's seen as one of the most influential women in UK tech. Yet she came from such humble beginnings, being adopted at 3 weeks old in Sri Lanka by a white family and then moving to Ireland. And we just delve into how she came from growing up in Ireland in a very small town, dealing with racism and being treated differently, to where she currently is right now. She shares so much value around leadership, ego, parenting, relationships, and just navigating in a space that does not look like you whatsoever. We also talk about gaming and dogs. I mean, you're not going to get another podcast where in one breath we're talking about Spyro the Dragon, in another breath we're talking about the Nobel Peace Prize, but you're going to have fun in this one. Let's delve straight into it. I have the pleasure of sitting down and talking to Sheree. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. It's good talking to you, especially after your mini break. You're back now.
Oh yeah.
No.
I am.
How you're currently working for Peakon as a global director of diversity. How is that going? And actually, why did you decide on Peakon? I'm sure you had a lot of offers coming your way.
I did, which was quite a nice position to be in, and a very privileged position to be in the middle of a global pandemic, to have so many offers and be able to pick which one really aligned with me and what I wanted to do. And so it's the end of my third week now. So and I had 7 weeks off, so I'm still getting used to being back into work after having quite a nice break. But it's really, really good that my role sits across all of our regions. So firstly, Peakon is an employee experience platform where we help people and companies listen intelligently to their organizations, really understanding, what is working for people, what isn't, and then providing different suggested actions and education around how you can ultimately make it better. And so I sit at a senior leadership level, 50% basically working internally on our own DE&I, and I will be sharing our first diversity, equity and inclusion report in a few months. I think I've just finished the strategy, so I'm aiming to share it in a little while externally for everybody to see. I am super transparent about all of the stuff that I do in any company, and I think that's a really important part of inclusion, that you share what you're doing, the gaps that you have, how you're trying to fill them, what realistic goals you're trying to achieve. Because one, it shares successes and best practices, but two, it also holds you to account from an external perspective, because society will hold you to account these days, and that's a good thing. And I'm enjoying that people are certainly feeling more empowered to speak and then to be heard. And then the other half of my role is actually working with our 1,000 plus clients globally, helping them with their DE&I, helping them bring to life their strategies using our Include product, which is a DE&I product focused in on helping people understand how people feel from a diversity perspective, an inclusiveness perspective, a non-discrimination perspective, and actually helping them bring to life using the data and the perception data that we help them gather, bringing it to life in a way that really does create strategic changes, as opposed to just, here's a load of numbers on a page, what do you do with that? So yeah, it's been super interesting and really, really exciting. I'm having a good time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how we keep going after the next few months as well.
So how do you deal with organizations who are not used to being so transparent?
I think there's a balance here in helping organizations Firstly, you have to understand where the organization is coming from and I guess the typical way that they operate. Some organizations are less transparent because of, for example, DE&I is more of a competitor piece and it's a worry to expose themselves. Now, do I agree with that mindset? No. But it's important in understanding the perspective regardless. What I think is important then is to show why transparency is so important. When we hide behind values or lofty statements, we are not really making a difference and we are not being very, very honest. And half of the reason we're in the predicament that we are in right now is because of a lack of honesty and a lack of transparency. And we can use a perfect example is, for example, how in the UK we are grouping people and people of colour, for example, in the terminology of BAME, so Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnics. Now, I have a really big problem with that, and you'll see in previous reports I've shared and in the Peakon one that's coming out. I think it's important that you report overall your BAME breakdown, but what I think is more important is that you actually break it down per those different groupings and for the census data, because otherwise you're not painting a very fair picture. Because even in the instance of people of colour representation and Black people representation in, let's say, London versus somewhere like Northern Ireland is very, very different. And you have to paint that picture. But if you don't do that, you're not being honest, which means we then have companies saying things like, oh, we have 25% BME in senior leadership. But what we're actually saying is we have 20% Asian people and maybe one or two Black people if you're lucky. And that's a problem. And transparency and that level of granularity is really, really important, because otherwise, how do you fix something if you don't know where you're at? And also the people that are coming into your organization and wanting to join, wanting to be part of your mission, don't know where you're at. Feels very disingenuous to me. And I think taking people on that journey, helping them understand the benefits to them too, because again, you can't unearth problems if you don't unearth the problem. So you're wasting your time, you're wasting efforts whenever you could be doing something really meaningful. And again, when I'm capturing this data and when I'm taking organizations on this journey, I do suggest capturing data across all different characteristics like ethnicity, gender, neurodiversity, disability, and so on and so forth. Not every organization is in a position to do that. So it's about helping them hone in on what their focuses need to be to make a strategic impact first. And usually that will be gender and ethnicity. The and ethnicity part is still quite a big jump for people, even right now, which is still baffling to me. But I think the useful thing for people is when they have someone like me who has done this for years and done it very successfully for years, is listening to best practice. But it is a journey for people, absolutely. And it's one I think a lot of organizations are still going on.
So you just mentioned that the diversity part is, a lot of companies are still struggling with that. Even in this day and age we're currently going through right now. How do you talk leaders through that piece, and how do you personally handle it?
There will always be people that don't get this, okay? And I think I always caveat that at the start, because I know a lot of people a lot of people expend so much energy on the people that really don't get it that they're exhausted. And when I say exhausted, I mean like brain tired, emotionally exhausted, spent, all of those things. What I think is really important is helping people understand how it has worked and why it works and what you need to do. Now, I think for me, what I do is I tend to describe people in terms of their engagement with DE&I as sort of either cold, which means they really don't get it. They're actually a detractor and they're against the mission. They are lukewarm, which means, they don't care either way, but they're not taking anything away from it. They're not actually causing any harm. Or positive, they're really bought in. They're really trying to make things better. Now, if you can at least get cold people to lukewarm, then they're at least not damaging. Now, it's very easy usually to move lukewarm people to hot through data analysis, through showing them the successes of other people in the industry, to proving even from the business perspective the benefits and how that links into your business strategy if you're trying to grow and all those other things. But the cold people, what's really important is understanding their perspective as to why they're so against it. Now, what you'll usually find is that that's based on how they have been raised, the upbringing they have had, and the people that have surrounded them as they've grown up, and then therefore continue to, embody and encapsulate the type of behaviors that they have seen that have been acceptable to them in their remits, but certainly are not acceptable in a wider society piece. So for example, if you are raised, and I think financial and socioeconomic background is a huge part of inclusion. And as someone who grew up on free school meals and is well aware of what that means, like to be in that environment, when you grow up in an environment where you haven't had that worry, or you haven't had that environment where your family struggles, or you actively are aware of what money means, which is a really big thing to not have to worry about, that shapes how you think about things. It shapes what you think opportunity means and how difficult to get opportunity is for you versus someone else. Now, if you continue to embody and I guess take in that view as you go through the working environments that you're in, you move into leadership and C-suite, etc., how does that influence who you hire and why you hire them? Because if you're still believing that, oh, well, anybody can do this because I did it, without actually accepting the fact that you've had a huge amount of privilege and benefit from your parents' wealth, then you're really being very disingenuous. And I think it's a big part in understanding people's backgrounds. And quite a lot of the work that I do with senior leadership in the industry is really taking people on that journey. And it is really difficult for some people because it is eye-opening. And it's complicated for people for sure, but I think it's one that's very, very needed.
So recently I've been having a conversation around the business case for diversity. You know, McKinsey, HBR, Boston Consulting Group, all that. And the conversation I was having was, why do we keep on reeling out this report year on year when one, data's there, but people have ignored it? But two, isn't that also feeding into part of the problem? Why should you have to justify a case for diversity when it's just basic human common decency and common sense?
Yeah, and it is basic human common decency and common sense, but also people like money. And the problem is that people like us and people who care about this stuff really do genuinely care. Does everybody care in the way that we do? No. And that's a problem, yes. That's a wider human problem because people, and I always say this, people are inherently selfish. Okay, we know that. And you have to challenge that in yourself. I know, like, even myself, I would never claim to have, everything I do is perfect because it's absolutely not. But I challenge that in myself, and I spend a lot of time making sure, even when I'm talking to my partner, if there are things that someone says that I don't agree with, I sit back and I have to think, do I not like that because of this reason or that? And I spend that batting that back and forth with myself to make sure I'm not being inherently selfish, etc. But people are like that. And so we have to understand as well that as much as it would be fantastic for everybody to care, that we need to do this because, like you said, it is human decency. It is simply not acceptable that people from marginalized groups have less opportunities simply because of those different traits. However, not everybody thinks that way. Now, we can try and take people on that journey, and we do that. But one way to engage those cold people, like I mentioned, is the business benefit piece. And I think it is important genuinely as well to actually talk about the business benefits of this too, because there are, like you've touched on the McKinsey piece, etc. There are so many business benefits to this. And I think that is a big part of inclusion as well. And again, understanding that for you to grow in a healthy way, you should be prioritizing this. Otherwise, you're not doing your job right.
Yeah, I can see where you are coming from with that. Now, based on the experiences you've had being a senior leader yourself, as well as working with a lot of leaders in organizations, what would you say makes a good leader?
I write about this a lot. I did a Forbes piece on this not too long ago. And I think for me, so I describe my leadership technique as firm but empathetic. So I'm very direct. I'm very, I don't like to say blunt, but probably a little bit blunt, but always empathetic in that even when I'm delivering very difficult or bad news, my aim and goal is still to make sure someone doesn't feel bad about this or understands the process, or I'm being as transparent as possible and feeling it from their perspective as well. And what I think really good leadership is vulnerability. Firstly, I think for you to be a good leader and be able to direct people with a vision and help them and have them, want to bring that vision to life, you have to be vulnerable. Now that means being vulnerable about your own successes and growth areas and what you're doing to fill those. but also the mistakes that you may have made in the journey. We see a lot, I personally hate the phrase, what is it, like the hustle culture that we see. I hate that word. It makes me cringe a lot. But we see this hustle culture that is embedded into technology, for example, and we see all the big, big wins, but we don't see an awful lot of the actual fails and the things that haven't went well and the things that have been really difficult. So then people view leadership as this unattainable thing because they've had mistakes, and they're like, well, I could never do that because I've messed up so many times. I mean, I can't even keep count of how many times I've messed up. But the point is, I'm still a senior leader and I'm very good at what I do. So vulnerability is really important. The second thing I think which is important is empathy and being able to really, really listen to people. Now, and this is one of the reasons why I came to Peakon as well, because I've used the product and it really enables that two-way listening between everybody in a psychologically safe way. But as a senior leader and a leader or in middle management, whatever, being able to listen and not listen facetiously in that, oh, I hear what you're saying, I'll see you later. But actually, I hear what you're saying, let me take this away, let me think about it, and let me see what makes sense. The answer that you may come back with, like I said, may be difficult news, and you deliver that empathetically. Or it may be a change of heart or whatever it is that we're talking about. But being able to listen and being willing to be wrong is a really big thing. Quite often we see in leadership, there is the assumption that leaders are always correct. Therefore, we shouldn't challenge. Now, that's just silly because humans are wrong all the time. And being in leadership doesn't change the fact that you are a human. So ergo, you're going to be wrong some of the time. But you have to be willing to be told, actually, this wasn't what I needed right now, or this didn't land the way you thought it was going to. And then the third thing I think that's really important is remembering that intention and impact are not the same thing. And if they do not align, that is on you. So your intention as a leader may be that you're doing something that you think this is really, really good. This will really help people. I think this is what they need. If the impact on those people is that it's actually damaging, it's hurtful, you've done it the wrong way, etc., it doesn't matter if your intention was good. The impact is still negative. And you have to, as a senior leader, sit back and actually take a breather, because I know it's very easy to get defensive when that happens. But to sit back and actually think, okay, why did this not land? Did I listen enough? Did I actually hear what people wanted, or did I make assumptions? Is my expertise telling me actually that what I'm doing is correct in this group of people or whatever maybe aren't? And do I need to take them on a journey to really engage them more? But spending that time to sit back and really engage in that way is incredibly important. And again, remembering that if your impact and your intention don't line up, or your intention and impact don't line up, that it's on you to do that work, not those other people, and not the people that you're ultimately trying to lead. You have that responsibility as a leader.
I subscribe to that model, and that's something I do when I work with my clients. However, it's something I'm also very aware of, that it doesn't come natural and easy to a lot of people. A lot of leaders don't have that ability to self-reflect or have that self-awareness to take a step back. And there's also that ego that tends to be in the room as well. So how did you develop that ability for yourself as a senior leader, and how do you help other leaders do the same?
Yeah, I think there is always egos in every room. And ego is something like that really frustrates me as well, because I always see like confidence and ego are two different things. I am very confident, but would I say I have an ego? Maybe somebody else would say that I do, but I try my best not to. And I really challenge myself to make sure I don't cross that line. But I view ego as a real barrier to progress and a real barrier to business growth, because it means that you have to spend time massaging someone's feelings to get something done, as opposed to just getting it done. And I think for myself, being able to grow into, I guess, the kind of leadership that I think that I know I do well, and I obviously can do things better as well. But I've spent a lot of time on self-reflection, to be honest. I did not have an easy upbringing. So I was adopted when I was 3 weeks old from Sri Lanka by a white family in Ireland. And I'm very, very privileged to have done that, or have been adopted, because it's given me all of the benefits of the Western world. I've been able to go to university. I've been able to have food every night and have a pillow to sleep on. I now have a partner who I can comfortably talk about, and we're married. We're both heterosexual people. But I think growing up was not easy in a place that is very, very white. So, for example, Northern Ireland, like I said, has 2% of the community is from Black, Asian, or minority ethnic backgrounds. So it is very undiverse. Now, I'm from that's even like Northern Ireland as a whole. I'm from rural Ireland, which is even more undiverse. And certainly in the 90s, it's different now because of immigration, etc. But back then it wasn't. And my brother, who is also adopted from Sri Lanka, there weren't many people of colour in the town that we grew up in. Now, everybody loves the cute brown baby when it's cute, but when you grow up, then the racism hits you right in the face. And that changes how you view yourself when you are always the only, like you are always the only brown person in the photo. Like in the school photos, you know, the ones you get in secondary school, the big long photo of the entire school. And it was always very easy to find me and my brother because we were the only two brown faces in the entire picture. Now, that sounds funny, but whenever you actually get into, you know, when you become a teenager and you start to grow up, and again, the racism hits, people treat you differently because of that. Now, me and my brother faced a lot of racism growing up. We were called the N-word. We were shouted at in the streets. We were treated differently. My brother used to work in a nightclub and people would call him a monkey and things like this. And I think what's really important here to note is I have dark skin, but my brother is notably darker than me, like much, much darker than me. And it cannot be forgotten that colorism has played a huge part in how we're both treated, because I don't face the same overt racism that he still faces in his life. And we're both 29 now. But I am much lighter skinned than he is. And I think that's an important point. But I think when you grow up in that kind of environment, and then I used to be a software engineer, when you come into the tech industry and you're also the only woman, ergo the only woman of color, and then you sort of move forward in a way where you're still always the only, I think that shapes a more humbling approach to leadership. Because for me, I view leadership as a very, very big privilege. It's a huge privilege to have a voice that people want to listen to and that do actively listen to. And I remember the point in my career at the start, when I would speak, they would talk over me. Whereas now when I speak, everybody shuts up. And I remember the point like about 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe slightly longer, like 6 years ago, where that happened. And I remember coming home to my partner and being like, this is different, because I know that those are the same people who a number of years ago did not care what I was saying. Whereas now they are sitting back in their chair, folding their arms and listening. And that's a privilege. And I am incredibly privileged to have that. And I think that's why the kind of leadership that I talk about is really important to me, because I know what it's like not to be listened to. I know what it's like to be underrepresented in some way. Now, do I know what it's like to be, for example, a Black woman in the industry? Of course I don't. And that experience is much, much different than mine as an Asian woman. And I think that has to be noted as well. And so a big part of the role that I play now, and as a senior leader, is to make sure that I am, one, listening to all of the different voices around me, making sure that we are not forgetting about those who are neurodiverse, who are disabled, who are from different sexual orientations and so on, and making sure that I am not creating the same problems that leaders before me have done. But then also amplifying those voices as well, that are, you know, the Sheree that I was 7 or 8 years ago, because it simply isn't just about me. And that's why the work that I do with Women Who Code is so important, because it has been about creating a new generation of women leaders across the globe from all different backgrounds. And I've worked with them for, I think, 7 or 8 years now, and built up their UK expansion, built up remote teams, built up leadership, and continue to now sit at a senior leadership level where I do that globally for them, really driving people towards that organization. Because it's not about me. I won't live forever, nor do I want to. And the point is that if I don't leave it better than I found it, and I found it in a kind of rubbish way, to be honest, if I can make it even marginally better in the circles that I am in, then I'm doing something good. And that maybe sounds kind of fluffy, but I do think it's really important. And I do think that kind of awareness comes from having very different lived experience my entire life. So yeah, I know that's quite a long answer to what you asked, but yeah.
No, it was the way you just described it all kind of fits in, or brings in together. And as you were talking, I was just thinking, how did you navigate dealing with racism in Northern Ireland, and then obviously going throughout your career, like you just said, at 22 you were speaking up and they were ignoring you, but you kept on going and you kept on pushing and you didn't stay silent.
Yeah.
How did you get that courage to keep on pushing regardless of being marginalized?
Yeah. So I think the first point of your question around growing up in Northern Ireland and dealing with racism is that you get very used to it. I remember, so me and my brother went to different schools. I went to a Catholic grammar school and he went to an integrated school. So in his school, there was a lot more actual diversity of different demographics because it was an integrated school. It wasn't a faith-based school. So there was lots of different religions represented and stuff like that. But we both, like, opposite ends of the town, and we would both walk up to the town. And there was an area that he could not walk past because every time he would walk past there, even with his friends who were primarily white, another school would shout racist abuse at him. They would call him the N-word. They would walk behind him and call him monkey and all these other things. Until he would get up to the town, and then he felt safer because he was in obviously a very public space. Now, you get used to that behaviour because he then just basically decided, I'll just walk the long way from now on. That's rubbish. And you get used to, whenever you then start to grow up and people start treating you differently because you don't look like the people that they are, find attractive, and how that then makes you feel incredibly low because you're like, well, I will never look like those people because I'm an entirely different ethnicity, so what am I going to do about that? But it's more than just obviously attractiveness. It's then about opportunity and so on and so forth. But I think you get used to being treated in that way and it becomes part of the norm. What I will say is my dad does not take any rubbish, and he spent a lot of time fighting against people, physically as well as mentally, when they would say stuff about us. And he does not take any prisoners. I remember whenever we were adopted and he went, my mother and him went back to where he is from in Ireland. And one of his aunts had said, oh, could you not have got them in a lighter colour? And he was like, what did you say about my children? And he never spoke to her again. He didn't go to her funeral when she died. He was like, that's not part of my life anymore. That's it. And she reached out because they were actually quite close. She reached out quite a lot throughout his life, and he was just like, nope, that's not happening. And he's had conversations with that about people, and he's had, a lot of people making comments again about him adopting brown children and stuff, and he just does not suffer fools lightly. He may have broken a few jaws in his time because he doesn't play that game. And I wouldn't say lucky because that's what he should be. Well, I wouldn't condone violence, but it's his job to protect his children, and he did that. But I think when you mentioned there, I guess, being in an environment where you are marginalized and you have to speak up and you're not listened to, I spent a lot of time. So when I launched Women Who Code, so background of Women Who Code is they are the world's largest nonprofit globally dedicated to women in tech. And we have over now 230,000 global members, and we run free monthly meetups in all of our locations for women and non-binary folk to come together to learn from the specialists on the skill sets that are being hired in their area, and also create a sense of community, belonging, and all of those kinds of things that are really important. And when I wanted to launch Women Who Code in the UK, so it started off with its base really in San Francisco. And when I started out with leadership there were only 5,000 members globally. So lots of expansion. When I wanted to bring them across the UK, I got a lot of friction, I guess, from people whose view was, well, I tried to do something similar and it didn't work. Or, well, why would somebody listen to her versus me when I've been in the industry for however many years and she's just graduated and is a software engineer?
Was that from men and women, or
both? Yeah, both. Actually, quite a lot from women as well. And I think that comes from feeling threatened and insecure. I also don't actually care if someone feels that way about what I'm trying to do, because the point was that there was a bigger goal here than, like I said, massaging egos. And it got to the point for me, there was a lot of times where I remember, because I was with my partner then too, where I came home and, he would come forward to visit, and I would say, I was like, why am I doing this? Because these are the people that ultimately will decide, because they were the big players then. It's like they would decide whether I am going to be successful or if I'm going to get promoted. They're going to decide that. How can I keep, pushing against them? And I sort of went back and forth with myself. And then I just realized, if I don't try something, my name is attached to this. At this stage, it had been in the press. I was doing all these really great things that people like me didn't do. And I was like, I cannot waste the fact that I have all of this energy around something. I have to at least try. And I wouldn't lie and say that it's always been easy and that I still don't get people who are, I guess, a thorn and don't like what I do or feel like they can do it better. But honestly, I just don't care anymore. And I got to the point where I just didn't care anymore, because what I am doing, I'm being able to, and I think you cannot care about what people like that are saying and still be willing to be wrong. And I'm very much in that space. But I know I'm good at what I do. I don't have an awards cabinet because I'm rubbish at what I do. I'm not a global director at 29 because I'm rubbish at what I do. Do you know what I mean? We're not playing games here. I don't have a book deal at 29 because I'm really bad at my job. So there's times here where I sit back and I say this to people when people always ask, what's your biggest piece of advice, is to always be aware of what you do and do well. How can you talk about how good you are at something if you actually don't know it yourself? And that's why I know I can just say, I'm good at this, and this is why I'm good at this. Because honing that confidence is really important. Now, honing it in a way that's really important and also being willing to still be wrong is more important. But you should always be your biggest fan, because there will always be people that will not get your mission.
That is powerful. And the reason I'm going to say that is, especially in the UK, we don't tend to talk a lot about our achievements, and it's seen as, oh, you're being proud, you're bragging, you're being arrogant.
Yeah.
But actually, you need to speak up about yourself, and you need to be like, I've done this, I'm good at this.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the States, especially, they do it a lot, and that's just normal and natural to them. Whereas in the UK, we're a lot more reserved and conservative. But what you just said is so important. It's like, actually, I'm doing this because I'm good at this, and this is my area of specialties. So therefore, and the more you can amp yourself up, forget everyone else. If you can do it for yourself, you have that confidence to go ahead and do things that you're talking about and things that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, and I deliver training as well on empowering yourself to empower others, as I think it's a really powerful tool when you are confident enough in yourself, when you are confident enough to be able to say, this is what I'm really good at, and these are the things I need to get better at. To be able to then set that tone, set that environment. And I do that quite a lot. I guess I use myself and the way I speak and how I deliver messages to set a tone for other leadership, to make it easier for them to do it, and so on. And I think that's a really, really powerful thing. And I do agree that we are conditioned to be quite, especially people from underrepresented backgrounds. And again, there's a lot of cultural elements that play into this. But I do think we're conditioned to be, I guess, modest to a fault, modest to the extent that you're just not willing to talk about yourself, but are willing to hype up other people. And I'm like, hype up both, hype up yourself and hype up other people. There's plenty of room for everybody.
How have you found it navigating male-dominated leadership teams?
At this stage, I'm very well used to it, and it doesn't faze me anymore, because as rubbish as it sounds, it is the default. And it's a default because of the things that I've talked about already, that we've gotten to this position. At the start of my career, it was very daunting to me, probably slightly overwhelming as well, because one of the things that I am always, not anymore, but I used to be really, really worried about, was that the people in the leadership teams that either before I was in leadership that I was presenting to and stuff did not speak like I speak, did not come from backgrounds that I come from, do not have similar backgrounds to me. These are people that were, either born wealthy or speak very eloquently. And people have made comments on my accent. I know I have a very thick accent. It's not changing anytime soon. And I like that you're shaking your head, but people have made comments on that. And it was something I had a really big, worry about, because a lot of the people, certainly when I was doing things, and I still, because I have my own consultancy business, doing things with big corporates and stuff, it's not an issue now because of who I am and the work that I do. But back then, before all of that, the people that I were leading and were in rooms with were predominantly people with, very, I guess, London-based accents. And my accent is not that game. Do you know what I mean? It's not happening. And the problem was that people would view me as less intelligent because of my accent, because of the assumption of where I came from, etc. And there's no relatability for me with a lot of people, because I remember whenever my dad telling me stories when we were adopted that like they ran out of money and he had to go to the pharmacy and say that he would do some favors for the pharmacist to get some milk bottles, and was coming up the road. He was super proud to be able to get these things, and he was doing something for the guy later to pay him back because he didn't have money at the time. And it was like, there are people that cannot like comprehend how that must feel. And I think when you go into leadership positions and you're surrounded by people that are very different to you, sometimes that can be very daunting and it can be very overwhelming because it feels like these people are just not going to get what I am talking about, or even the fact that this is an experience. Now, given the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the whole host of Black folks that we have seen that have been murdered, not just this year, not just last year, and years ago, but we're now seeing people, and mostly non-Black folks, saying things like, oh, I just didn't know that was a thing, or I can't believe that's happening. Like, how did you not know? Were you not paying attention? What is shocking about this? And it's because there's this huge disconnect because of your bubble. And if you don't you don't burst your own bubble and go out and listen to other voices, then you're just totally disillusioned and disconnected. But the thing with working in environments that have people that are not used to you, what I do now is I spend quite a lot of time in those environments, obviously. And I make it known that, I'm aware that there are people here that will not have the same. And I just make it very clear up front that, we are very different people, but this is what I need you to do. And I'm very direct about that now, because allies are incredibly important. And now if I don't have the backing or the support of the senior people also in the organization, it's very, very hard to change things. It's very, very hard to push against and do things differently if, let's say, the CEO is just like, I don't actually care. And that's very important because most CEOs, as we know, are white, heterosexual, financially stable men. So we can't disengage with those people, nor do I want to. But they also have to be aware that there's a huge amount of growth. And I've spent time with quite a lot of CEOs, having to take them on that growth journey of really understanding what does it mean to be in the industry when you are not someone like you? And what does it mean for people coming into the industry now that are not someone like you? Because it is still very different. Let's say most CEOs are within like the 35 to 50 age group. That's a generation change, you know what I mean? So it's really important to bring them on that journey. But yeah, it's not always been easy, but it's easy now.
Have you had mentors along your journey?
I have. And I think I'm very lucky to have some people that have been really pivotal in my journey. And I think I have sort of sponsors more than mentors. And a sponsor is someone who's actively advocating for you in the room when you're not there, calling out your name, saying, oh, Sheree would be the best person for that opportunity, and so on and so forth. And there's one woman I always reference, and I was doing an interview yesterday as well, and I referenced her again. And there's a part of my book that I wouldn't say a full section because that would be kind of creepy, but a few paragraphs dedicated to her as well, her name is Jackie Henry, and she's a senior partner at Deloitte, where I used to hold senior leadership positions on DE&I. And Jackie is also from NI. She was also adopted and she's white, but was adopted by a white family. And she started off there as an accountant and now as a senior partner overseeing one of the biggest parts of the business, defining their whole people and purpose agenda across the consulting practice. And what Jackie did, and what's incredibly important that sponsors do in particular, is listen, and listen really, really well. And I know I keep saying that, but it's really important. And she spent the time understanding with me, what did I want and how did I see myself getting it? And then understood how she could, slot in to help me get that thing. So it was never Jackie's journey. It was always mine. She was just simply, I guess, when you play, I think like Mario Kart and you go across the things that make you go faster. She was the things that made me go faster. But it was never her journey. It was still my journey. It was my lap. It was my race. I can't believe I just used Mario Kart in that analogy. But yeah, I think that's a perfect analogy for what I mean. But the point is that she always sat in the background, but was always sort of just pushing me and nudging me forward, but also being willing to tell me, actually, these are ways that we could do it differently, because she's been in the business like 35 years. She's an MBE. She's done a whole host of things. So being able to have that relationship with her has been incredibly important. And I still catch up with her now every month, even though I'm not in Deloitte anymore. But having that kind of relationship and having that kind of, I guess, really active sponsorship has been incredibly important in my career. And I'm certainly very lucky to have had that.
I want to ask about the other person who has also been very important in your life that you've mentioned, which is your partner.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet, and how much of an impact has he had on you?
So my partner Sean, we've been married for 3 years together, just past 9, I think, in August. I sometimes get that wrong. There's too many dates to remember at this stage. But we met back home, and so I'm 29 and Sean is turning 33. So back when you're younger, that's quite a big age gap. So when I was 14, he was like 17, 18, depending on the month. And so we'd seen each other in the same town, but obviously never spoke, because it'd be kind of weird for a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old to be friends and in the same circle. But we listened to a lot of the same music, and had a lot of the same friend circles sort of separately. And then I started going to university, and when I had started university, he had just finished. And I seen him when I was out one night, and I probably had a few too many drinks and went up to talk to him. And we started chatting, and then we started messaging on Facebook whenever people did that. This is before WhatsApp as well, so please don't judge me. And I remember, because he's from back home as well, and his family has 2 farms, so he used to help his dad quite a lot on the farm. And I remember I'd send him messages, and then it wouldn't be until maybe 10 o'clock that night he would send me back this huge paragraphs of messages whenever he finally got signal again, because he wasn't up in the hills. There's no signal. And and then we just kind of hit it off. We're very similar, but also very different, which I know sounds kind of silly, but I am very driven in a way that, I'm laser focused with almost everything, sometimes to a fault. I also get stressed a lot, and he is very laid back in the best way, in that, if we were both the same as me, we would just be frazzled all the time. And if we were both the same as him, we would just never get anything done. So there's a good balance of both. And so he's a user experience designer, and has been doing that for God knows how many years now. But we moved up to we were in Belfast together, and then we moved over to London a few years ago because I was traveling quite a lot and made sense to move. I think the big thing with having a supportive partner is that I see people that don't have supportive partners, and it's a barrier, and it's like a door stopper. It stops you getting to where you need to go, because you're always worried about ego. Yet again, here we're talking about ego. And I think a lot of the time when we see unsupportive partners, it is about ego and insecurity. And I don't have time for that. And I don't have time for someone who needs their ego stroked all of the time. I simply don't have the time, nor do I have the energy for it. And I think having a supportive partner, and Sean is always willing to do whatever it takes. He knows how important my career is to me. If it means moving, if it means I'm going to leave a job and find something else. And he is always that constant, and that support mechanism and that rock, because there are times where it's difficult, where I am super stressed. I'm doing too many things. And if I didn't have that, I think I would just spiral. And I have burnt out in the past. I don't want to do it again. I think having someone like that I always say, the thing that I love about Sean is that he doesn't need to help me, but he wants to. He always wants to help. He always wants to do something that he always wants to look after me. And I don't need someone to do that, but him wanting to do that and him doing that because he really cares, I think is a really important thing.
That's beautiful. When you think back to the days of you playing Spyro the Dragon,
I was playing the new one when it came out not that long ago.
To what you're doing right now, what changed? Or has that journey always been what you had in your mind from those days to where you are right now?
I remember playing Spyro, the first ever Spyro, and I know it's not relevant, but the new one came out and it's the remastered version. I remember looking it up and seeing it was just triangles on a screen, just literally triangles that moved, and I still find that so funny. But I guess I never knew I was going to do the stuff that I did. I always imagined I would probably have a very normal career or life or whatever, like I didn't ever really plan to, you know, travel the world speaking at like amazing conferences. Like the next conference I'm speaking at is the Nobel Peace Prize celebration in a few weeks. Like, who from County Tyrone in Ireland does that? Nobody is the answer. Absolutely nobody. And writing for Forbes and doing all of this mad stuff, like I never imagined I was going to do this stuff. But what I think, whenever I started to realize maybe I could do something, maybe I'd do something quite small. Maybe I'd like, you know, make an impact, create a community in Belfast and kind of go from there. But I never thought I would then, you know, create a community across the entire UK, then going across Europe, then more and more and more. And I think when I look back to, you know, Sheree playing Spyro back all those years ago, I don't think I would have expected anything like this. I probably would have expected, you know, to meet someone, get married, have a job back home, and maybe that would be it. And that's totally fine as well if that's what I would have done. But I never expected that I would be, I guess, catapulted into the stuff that I do now. But I think the reason why I've been able to, you know, continue to move very, very fast has been, I guess I didn't put barriers myself. People will always put barriers in your way for you, so don't do it to yourself. But like at those moments where I guess I thought, oh, well, someone like me doesn't do stuff like this. Why should I do it? Why would they listen to me? Why would they want me to do that? I've just kind of pushed that to the side and I guess opened that gate to make sure that maybe they will though. Maybe they will want me to do that. Maybe they will want me to say that I should do it or speak or whatever it is. And because of that, I've just been able to continue to do these things. So I don't know what I'm going to do next, to be honest. I could do with it like a break. But yeah, it's definitely been an exciting journey for sure. But yeah, I'm always excited to see what I'll do next. Sometimes it's like I didn't expect to sign a book deal this year. I planned to do that much later, but it's quite nice to have written a book before I'm 30. So, I mean, it's a good thing for the list. Do you know what I mean?
How was that process for you?
So I have, at this stage, I have one chapter left to write, and I'm sort of aiming to get that done in the next few weeks. And then it's done. Then I don't have to write anymore. And God, it's been really, really cool. Like, to be honest, like I never thought I write a lot of like think pieces and blogs and stuff and thought leadership, but writing a book is very different because when you write a blog, people want to ultimately get the synopsis and get it quick, get it like that. They don't want to have to fuss. But a book, people want to digest every single sentence. That's why they get it. They sit down, they, you know, make the most of that space and that time. So it's writing in a different style and writing in a different way. And it's been a journey, you know, figuring that space out. And I have a great editor, so she reviews all of my work sort of after every 2 chapters and stuff. And I have an editing schedule. But the experience has been super, I guess, hard to balance as well, especially when you have a full-time job and you do global speaking tours and you have your own business and now you're writing a book, and it's a lot on top of each other. But the 7 weeks off that I had was, you know, very useful to get through that. So now because I only have one chapter left to write. But I'm super excited. Like, I think it's going to be amazing. We get a pre-order link in the next few months. They're working on the cover design at the minute, so I can't wait to see that. And then just having, like, my book is going to be in like W.H. Smith and stuff like that. Like, that's crazy, absolutely crazy. But again, yeah, I just can't wait. I think it's super exciting. Like, I hope my dad isn't the only one to buy a copy.
What's the book about?
Demanding more for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what it's really, I probably should have said that. It's really to help people understand what DE&I means from the beginning, talking through the history and the historic things that have shaped where we're at today, really delving into privilege and helping people open that conversation for themselves first. And then helping them understand how to engage senior leadership, middle management, and then actually planning and embedding inclusion into your work, into your day-to-day. And that's the really important part of it. The book isn't just a business book. It's about your day-to-day. Because quite often, I think people think DE&I is like something you do in work. I mean, like, no, it's about how you live, how you spend your money, where you go, who you associate with, how you treat people around you, who you warrant and view as important enough to listen to and who not to. And that doesn't just mean in your office, that means everywhere. And the book is really about expanding that out and also writing it in a way that people understand. One of the things I really dislike is that quite a lot of books in this space use a lot of fluffy language. And I hate that because my dad could never understand that. Why would he want to pick up that book? But for this book, my view is that, like, it's really powerful for people that are in business, but also for those that aren't and want to just know, what can I do as a person to, leave things better than I find them.
I can't wait to read it. Sounds
That's 2 copies of selling. Good.
You already got it down. You got the speech down, everything.
Sorted.
I'm going to ask you, I think I can't find a lot of pictures of you without Alfie. For those who don't know, Alfie's Sheree's 11-year-old dog, who was also the ring bearer at your wedding.
He was, yeah. Alfie plays a big part. I can't believe I'm talking about Alfie on a business podcast. Alfie plays a big part in everything, as much as annoying that may be. But yes, he's down in the office with my husband at the minute. But we always describe Alfie as the glue that holds the family together, because he is just that, like, doesn't matter what is going on in the world, Alfie is always ready to party. He is always ready to just have a good time or just chill out and let you pet him and relax. And I mean, like, that's, again, another perfect constant to have in your life, even though he is also a bit of a brat too. You mentioned the fact that you had burnout before, and you don't now. You're very focused, so to make sure it doesn't happen again. What have you done to help you avoid that happening? Yes, I think to avoid burnout, you have to have a lot of self-awareness, because otherwise you go down the spiral of not realizing until it's too late. Now, what I think is important is understanding your limits. And I don't mean your limits on what you can achieve. I don't mean that at all. What I mean is your actual physical and mental and emotional limits, and how can you keep giving if you don't ever take anything, if you don't ever take time for yourself. And one of the things that's really important to me from a burnout perspective is that I never attach myself to wherever I work intrinsically. Like, we have people where it's almost like a personality trait to work somewhere. And like, I've been down that path where I have, viewed a huge part of me as the place that I work. But I provide a service, they pay me for the service because I'm very good at it, and that's it. And I'm very invested in where I work and why, and I choose those places very carefully. But that is not a huge part of me as a person. It's where I work. And I think what's important is that people separate those things, because otherwise where's the line? Where's the separation for you? Also, what happens if you leave and you feel like you lose this huge part of yourself? But I also think what it means is that when you have that like intertwined connection, that there are times that you will give so much because you care so much, whether that's incredibly late hours all of the time, whether it's, working over deadlines even though you don't need to, or setting that expectation, that then you forget about yourself and you forget that you're paid to do that job. If you weren't doing it well, you wouldn't work there. And I make sure that I always separate those things, because the things that are important to me are my family, are being able to, have a life that I didn't expect that I was going to have, and be able to, enjoy all of those different things and to be able to make a difference. But it is not to prioritize work at every single step of the way. And I think that's the lesson I learned very early on. And I'm very clear. That's why I said before we started recording, I finish at 5 or 5:30, depending on what time I start at, and that's it. Now, what I will say is my partner, if he comes in and he sees me that I'm still working, he's like, Sheree, why are you still on that computer? Turn it off. So I have a check as well in case sometimes I slip because I get so enthralled. But yeah, I think it's important that you have that self-awareness in check, especially in leadership too, because you are role modeling the behavior that you want the rest of the business to have. So if you are doing those kinds of things, you're setting an expectation for everyone else, and that's simply not fair. It's a power play and power imbalance, and I don't like that. There's one question I want to ask you around this topic, which is how do you, if you're working in an environment where things aren't right and you want to speak up, but you are scared to do so, how do you get the courage? And I'm going back to you, actually, what you did when you spoke about Munza, for example, and you said, actually, with everything going on with BLM, my role's up, and you put it out there very, very publicly as well, and which a lot of people got encouragement from, and they were like, wow, that's absolutely amazing. But there are also a lot of people who are in organizations who want to speak up but are scared to do so. So I'm trying to find out how you navigate that. I think what's important is that people look after themselves too. I think we forget a lot of the time that people are people, and if something happens that doesn't feel right to you, maybe you don't feel privileged enough to be able to publicly talk about it or whatever else it might be. And I don't really have anything to add to that, what happened there. But what I think is important, that you're able to figure out the best path forward for you. Now, maybe that isn't in the organization that you are in, and it is a huge privilege to be able to just be like, I'm going to yeet myself out of here. I'm going to do what I want and go. And I know I'm able to do that because of the interest and acceptance people have for me. But what I would always suggest is that nothing is worth enough. Nothing and no job is worth you feeling bad all of the time. Nothing is worth you feeling like you're exhausted by coming into the office, or that you feel like people just don't get you. And no amount of money, and I know it sounds like a really silly thing to say, and I can say that because I'm really well paid, but no amount of money is worth you feeling like that all of the time. It's just simply not worth it. And I think what's important whenever people feel like they want to, leave or speak up is, it is not a bad thing either if you feel like don't feel guilty if you feel like you can't speak up, because you have to look after yourself and your own financial security and the people maybe that you look after. And there is no shame in that. But also remember that if you want to speak later, that you can do that on your terms. It is on your terms. And that's what I think is really important here, is that, it's not easy. But I think, and I know certainly from my perspective, holding organizations to account is literally what I do. It's literally my job in many, many ways. And I will always do that.
So to wrap this up, I'm going to ask you a couple of quick fire questions. What's the one thing that your dad has taught you that has stayed with you throughout?
He does not take nonsense from anyone. And I mean, absolutely no one. Like, it doesn't even matter if that person is the wealthiest person in the world. He does not give a thing. He does not care. And like, he's now 69, so it's his 70th birthday next year, and he's been very sick for a while, and he's sick, and even now he still just doesn't care. And it gets worse when he gets older. He has no tact now, so like, he'll say things when he's in the hospital, and I'm like, Dad, you can't say that. Can you say it lower at least? And he's like, no, I will not. I'll say what I want. So the good thing of that, I guess, that I've learned is that say what you want, but also say it respectfully when you can. I wouldn't always suggest saying it in the way my dad says it. But yeah, he just doesn't take nonsense, and I just don't take nonsense anymore. And yeah, that was one thing I've learned from him.
What are your 3 guiding principles or values that you live by? 1,
never accept disrespect. I had to get to a stage where I was comfortable being able to do that, and it's a privilege again, but I do not accept disrespect from anybody, and I will make that very clear. And like, when I was going through interviews and chatting to people and chatting to C-suite before I decided where I wanted to go, I said that in every interview. I'm like, never confuse me for someone you can disrespect, because I will call you out and you'll either find it uncomfortable and you'll learn from it, or you'll not and you'll do it again and I will leave. So I don't accept disrespect. 2 is, remember that you will probably be wrong sometimes, or more often than not. But that has to be a principle, I think, to remember that you're not always right, even if you are really good at what you do. And I think the third one is remembering that what you need from an organization, for example, is just as important as what they need from you. So what do you need when you move to your new job or a new position? What is it that you really want to get? Is it like different growth areas? Is it different opportunities? Is it being mentored by someone or led by someone with more experience than you, and so on? But I think that's really important, because quite often we see moving to somewhere, especially when you come from backgrounds like me, where you're so grateful just to be like, I can't believe I'm here and I'm earning this wage and I'm doing this, that you also forget that you're earning this wage and you're doing this because you're really good at it. So you're also allowed to have things that you want to.
Music-wise, what do you like listening to?
I guess I listen to lots of different types of music. I've always listened to metal, and really like heavy metal, and that's one of the things I guess me and my partner have in common. And we, before the world kind of took a collapse, we would go to like gigs and stuff together quite a lot. But I also love like 90s boy bands like Westlife, and like like I love Westlife so much. I don't think you can be an Irish woman and not love Westlife, so I think it's a rite of passage, really. But yeah, I like lots of different things. But yeah, most of the time I would listen to metal. Yeah.
That is heavy metal, Westlife, like. Yeah.
Give it a go. It depends on the mood. It depends on the vibe that I'm trying to get into. Sometimes I still listen to, remember like S Club 7?
Yeah.
Sometimes I still listen to that because it's just happy, and it's just good vibes. There's no problem.
What is the one piece of advice you wish someone gave you 5 years ago?
One piece of advice that I wish someone gave me 5 years ago was to, it's okay to slow down as well. I move very, very fast, and that's worked out well for me so far. I've done a lot of great stuff, but that also means I've burnt out. That also means that I've had to, find a balance I guess, taken me longer to find a balance than it could have. And I think that's because I've always been really keen to prove myself. Like, this is what I can do. I can do this well, even though you think I can't. And I've got to a position now where I don't need to do that anymore. And I wish I had, I guess, that self-awareness earlier. But I guess it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. And when you're more junior in your career, you're trying your best to scramble and, make people not doubt you, especially when you come from an underrepresented background in some way or another. But I think that's really important advice, is that it's okay to go at like a pace that isn't like Sonic the Hedgehog.
You mentioned mistakes earlier on, and I want to find out, what is the biggest mistake that you can share that you've made, and what did you learn from it?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that I learned was whenever I started Women Who Code and I brought it across the UK, it was like my creation. Like, I took it from nothing and I built it up. And at the start of that, when I was building out remote teams, I held on too tight. To like the people that I was empowering to be leaders, to the extent that they felt, what's that word? Smothered by me. And again, I was 22 at that stage. I was still figuring things out, and I just didn't want it to go wrong. But what I should have done was obviously, sit back and be confident that I had brought the right people on board. They were the right people because of XYZ reasons. And what I learned from that was that it's important to recognize that you don't always have to be involved for it to be your success. So like I sponsor a lot of people in the industry, and I mentor a lot of people, and your success doesn't have to be directly linked into anything. It can be simply that you're helping in the background, that you're providing guidance, that you're overseeing it, your management, etc. But you don't have to be in the nitty-gritty every day. You don't have to be in the operation sides of things if you have people that can do that, because they want to do it, and they will get the growth opportunity for that, and then they'll get someone else to do it, and so on and so forth. And I think that's a really important lesson, is delegation. Any senior leader should be able to delegate well, and know also when actually I'm not the right person for this, but this person is, and we should bring them in instead. And
the last one would be, what would you want your legacy to be?
My legacy? I'm only 29.
You've done a lot already, so.
Yeah, I think, and I was talking to Sean about this not that long ago, and I think one of the reasons I came to Peakon was my legacy, to be honest. The work that we do affects already over 1,000 customers, which is over thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Now, by creating an industry standard on how you measure inclusion and how you create successful strategic DE&I strategies, we're changing an ecosystem. We're creating a way to do this and to do it well. And for me, with my legacy overall, like, I want to look back and be able to say I made a sizable difference. Now, I do feel like I've done that with Women Who Code even already, and the other stuff that I've done. But I want to keep doing that. And I want, I guess, when I look back, to be able to say, like, that energy was channeled in the right way. I did something that, like, other people are taking and making it even better than what I did. And I think that's what I would want my legacy to be, for sure.
Sheree, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think reading your work in Forbes, I'm sure I'm going to put the links in the show notes, listen to you speak on stage, having conversations with you, it's always you learn a lot and you grow, but it's that authenticity that comes through you. Like every single part of who you are is like, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I breathe. And it's great to have that as a leader, because you know that it's not someone who's trying to be something they're not. It's someone who's actually practicing and preaching what they speak in everyday lives. So that's absolutely amazing to see. And it's great to see you in those kind of positions, changing the game, challenging them, being direct, which it needs to happen. They need that shake up in those side of things. So really appreciate you doing that and the good work that you are doing. I can't wait to read the book.
Thank you.
We're going to have another conversation when that book comes out for sure.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. It was so lovely to chat.
Appreciate it. It's Everyday Leadership. Don't forget, I have show notes on my website, everydayleadership.buzzsprout.com. So check that out. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and tell someone else. appreciate your support. I'll see you next time. This is Everyday Leadership.
What?